The quiet species, the grand chamber of the Galactic Senate, stretched for nearly 3 kilometers in every direction. A vast dome of crystal and metal that had stood for 12,000 years at the center of the known universe. Ambassador Vortex of the Sithrani Collective sat in his designated observation pod, his 4 compound eyes scanning the latest intelligence report on the species designated Earth-human with a mixture of boredom and mild contempt. 300 years had passed since the Galactic Senate first detected primitive radio signals emanating from a small blue world on the outer spiral arm of an unremarkable galaxy. 300 years of watching and waiting and cataloging every stumbling step these creatures took toward the stars. The report in front of Vortex told the same story it always told. Humans had managed to land crude machines on their neighboring planets. They had built orbital stations that wobbled and leaked and required constant repair. They had sent tiny probes beyond their solar system, probes that would take thousands of years to reach even the nearest star. All of this was documented in the dry, bureaucratic language of the Senate's observation corps, the same language used to describe 1,000 other primitive species across 1 million worlds. Class 7 developing species. The report concluded projected trajectory: extinction within 200 standard cycles due to environmental collapse, nuclear conflict, or resource depletion. Vortex clicked his mandibles in what passed for a sigh among his kind. He had lived for 900 years and had seen dozens of species follow this same sad pattern. They would discover fire and feel like gods. They would split the atom and feel invincible. They would reach their moon and believe the universe belonged to them, and then they would destroy themselves, as all primitive species eventually did, consumed by their own violence and greed and short-sighted foolishness. The Sithrani had watched this cycle repeat so many times that they had stopped feeling anything about it. New species rose and fell like waves on a cosmic shore, and the great civilizations of the galaxy endured. Unchanging and eternal High Arbiter Kelmoreth, the ancient being who had led the Senate for 3,000 years, called the session to order with a resonant hum that vibrated through every translator node in the chamber. Today's agenda concerned a minor trade dispute between the hegemony and collective over mining rights in a remote asteroid field. Vortex settled deeper into his pod, prepared for another tedious session of diplomatic posturing across the galaxy. On the small blue world the Senate had dismissed so completely, something very different was happening. Dr. Amara Chun stood in the command center of a facility that did not officially exist, buried 3 kilometers beneath the mountains of a nation that had publicly declared itself neutral in all global conflicts. The facility had been built in secret over the course of 40 years, funded by a coalition of governments who had agreed on almost nothing else in human history. But they had agreed on this. They had agreed that the signals were real. Amara remembered the day she had first learned the truth, 20 years ago, when she had been a young physicist working on theoretical models of faster-than-light communication. Her mentor, an old man named Dr. James Okonkwo, had taken her aside after a lecture and asked if she could keep a secret. The secret had changed everything in 1977. A radio telescope in Ohio had detected a signal that became known to the public as the WOW signal. The official story was that its origin remained unexplained, probably a natural phenomenon, possibly a reflection of Earth-based transmissions. The real story was that the signal had been the first piece of a puzzle that humanity had spent the next several decades assembling in absolute secrecy. The signals had never stopped. They had simply been too faint and too complex for public detection systems to identify, but the hidden network of receivers that the global coalition had built, disguised as weather stations and communications arrays and research facilities, had been listening all along, and more importantly, they had been learning. Amara walked along the main corridor of the facility, past laboratories where scientists worked on technologies that the rest of humanity would not see for centuries, past engineering bays where ships were being built using principles that violated everything the public understood about physics, past training centers where the first generation of true astronauts prepared for journeys that would take them beyond the solar system. The translation had taken the longest. The alien languages were nothing like human speech, built on concepts and assumptions that had no equivalent in any Earth tongue. But humanity had one advantage that they had used to its fullest time. The aliens did not know they were being observed. In return, they did not know that every transmission they sent, every communication between their vast fleets and ancient worlds, was being captured and analyzed by a species they had written off as primitive and doomed. They did not know that humans had spent 3 centuries building in silence, preparing for the day when they would announce themselves to the galaxy not as supplicants, begging for scraps from the table of the great civilizations, not as primitives hoping to be uplifted and taught like children, but as equals. Amara entered the main control room, where a team of specialists monitored the latest intelligence from the Senate's own observation posts. The irony was not lost on her. The aliens watched Earth through their satellites and probes, confident that the humans could not detect them, and the humans watched the watchers, reading their reports and listening to their conversations and learning everything they could about the civilization that had dismissed them so completely. General Marcus Torres stood at the central console, his weathered face lit by the glow of a dozen holographic displays. He turned as Amara entered and nodded in greeting. "The Senate is in session," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent preparing for this moment. The High Arbiter just called them to order. Amara moved to stand beside him, her eyes fixed on the display that showed the interior of the Grand Chamber in perfect detail. "Then it is time," she said. Torres looked at her for a long moment. "Are you certain we are ready?" Amara thought about the centuries of work that had led to this moment. Generations of scientists and engineers and soldiers who had dedicated their lives to a goal they would never see, fulfilled the sacrifices made in secret, the breakthroughs achieved in silence, the entire hidden history of a species preparing itself for its greatest challenge. "We will never be more ready than we are now," she said, "and we cannot wait any longer." She turned to the communications officer, a young woman whose grandmother had been among the first to decode the alien transmissions. "Send the signal," Amara said. "Let the galaxy know that humanity is ready to speak." The officer's fingers moved across her console, and somewhere in the vast machinery of the facility, systems that had been built over decades activated for the first team. A signal unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen burst forth from Earth, riding on waves of quantum-entangled particles that crossed the impossible distances between stars in the span of a heartbeat in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Senate. Every scream flickered, every communication node fell silent, and for the first time in 12,000 years, the great civilizations of the galaxy heard a voice they had never expected to hear, the voice of humanity breaking its long silence at last. The signal, the silence in the Grand Chamber lasted for exactly 4 heartbeats. Then chaos erupted. Ambassador Varthex rose from his observation pod so quickly that he nearly struck his head on the crystalline canopy above him. His 4 compound eyes darted between the frozen displays, each one showing the same impossible message in the same impossible languages. "Humanity requests to address the Senate." The message read in perfect Sithrani script. "We have been listening." It continued in the flowing symbols of the hegemony. "We are ready to speak." it concluded in the ancient tongue of the High Arbiters, a language that only 12 beings in the entire galaxy were supposed to know, 847 translations in total, one for every known language in the galactic community, delivered simultaneously to every communication node across 17,000 member worlds. The technology required for such a transmission was beyond anything a technology required for such a transmission was beyond anything a transmission was beyond anything a Class 7 species should possess. It was beyond anything most Class 10 species could achieve. High Arbiter Kelmorith's massive form trembled, the first visible emotion he had displayed in over 1,000 years. His voice boomed across the chamber, cutting through the rising tide of panicked voices. "Silence," he commanded, and the ancient authority in his tone brought immediate quiet. "Technicians, verify the source of this transmission." In the technical bay beneath the main chamber, a team of specialists worked with frantic speed. Vortex watched their progress on his private display, his mandibles clicking with increasing agitation. As the data scrolled past, the quantum signature was unmistakable. The signal had originated from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star on the outer arm of the galaxy. It had originated from Earth, but that was not the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was the speed. Galactic communications relied on a network of relay stations built over millions of years, a vast web of quantum-linked nodes that allowed messages to travel between stars in a matter of hours or days. The human signal had reached every corner of the galaxy in under 3 seconds. It had not used the relay network at all. Senator Mrickstole of the hegemony was the first to voice what many were thinking. "This is impossible," he declared, his scaled hide flushing with the colors of denial and fear. "A hoax, surely, perpetrated by some faction seeking to destabilize the Senate." "The signature is verified," Kelmorith replied, his voice heavy with something that sounded almost like dread. "The signal came from Earth, transmitted by technology we do not recognize. Then we must assume the monitoring data was falsified." Mrickstole insisted. "The humans we observed are not capable of this." Vortex found his voice at last. "Or the humans we observed were not showing us their true capabilities." The chamber fell silent again. For 300 years, the great civilizations of the galaxy had watched Earth with the casual interest of giants observing insects. They built observation posts in the outer reaches of the human solar system. They deployed stealth satellites in orbit around the human world. They had intercepted every radio transmission, analyzed every rocket launch, cataloged every fumbling step the humans took toward the stars, and not once in 3 centuries of observation had they considered the possibility that the humans might be aware of their presence. Not once had they imagined that the primitive species they dismissed so readily might be watching them in return. The implications were staggering. If the humans had been hiding their true level of advancement, if they had been deliberately presenting a false image to their observers, then everything the Senate believed about them was wrong. And if the humans could develop quantum communication technology in secret, what else might they have developed? What else might they be hiding in the facility beneath the mountains of Earth? Amara Chun watched the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. Holographic displays showed the interior of the grand chamber in perfect detail. Every expression of shock and fear and disbelief captured and transmitted across the impossible distances in real time. Signal received and acknowledged on all 17,000 primary worlds. The communications officer reported. Secondary relay to colony. Systems and outposts is proceeding as expected. General Torres stood with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the image of the High Arbiter. "They are afraid," he observed. "They should be," Amara replied. She turned to face the assembled staff. The men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment, they underestimated us, she said. For 300 years. They watched us struggle and fail and fight among ourselves. And they assumed that was all we were. They saw our wars and our pollution and our petty conflicts. And they concluded that we were doomed. They never considered that we might be capable of more. They never imagined that we might be playing a longer game than they could comprehend. She gestured to the displays showing the Senate chamber. Now, they know the truth. And they are terrified. But fear is not enough. We need them to understand the communications. Officer looked up from her console. They are voting on a response, she reported. Current projection indicates they will agree to receive our delegation. Torres raised an eyebrow. They are moving faster than we anticipated. They are scared. Amara said, "Scared beings move quickly, hoping that action will dispel their fear." She paused. "Considering the next step, we will give them something else to fear in the Grand Chamber." The vote concluded with overwhelming support for engagement. High Arbiter Kelmorath transmitted the response himself. A formal acknowledgement of humanity's request to address the Senate, the message was sent through the standard relay network. A journey that would take approximately 6 hours to reach Earth. The human response arrived in 3 seconds. "We accept your invitation," the message read. "Our representative will arrive shortly. Do not be alarmed. Vertex." Read the message 3 times, trying to understand what it meant a representative would arrive. Shortly, how the fastest ships in the galaxy required weeks to travel. From the outer arms to the Senate's central world, even with the most advanced technology known to the galactic community, the journey could not be made in less than several days, unless the humans had developed something else, something that the great civilizations of the galaxy had been trying to achieve for millions of years, something that was supposed to be impossible. The air in the center of the Grand Chamber began to shimmer, though. Dex watched in disbelief as reality itself seemed to fold inward, creating a ripple in the fabric of space that should not exist. A dark opening appeared, a window into somewhere else, somewhere that felt impossibly far away and impossibly close at the same time. And through that opening stepped a humana, single human woman in a simple gray uniform. Her dark hair pulled back from a face that showed no fear, no hesitation. No doubt she stood in the center of the Grand Chamber, surrounded by thousands of alien delegates who had spent 300 years dismissing her species as primitive and irrelevant, and she smiled. "My name is Dr. Amara Chun," she said, her voice carrying through translation matrices that activated automatically. "I speak for Earth. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." The chamber was utterly silent, not a whisper, not a breath, not a single sound from any of the thousands of beings who stared at the human woman with expressions of shock and terror, and something that looked almost like Amara Chun had just demonstrated technology that the Sith Rani collective had spent 40,000 years trying to develop. She had walked through a fold in space itself, traveling across half the galaxy in the span of a heartbeat, and she had done it alone. Without a ship, without visible technology, without any of the massive infrastructure that everyone believed such a feat would require. The quiet species had spoken, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again. The arrival. High Arbiter Kelmorath had witnessed many remarkable things in his 3,000 years of life. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched stars die and new worlds be born. He had presided over the Senate through wars and plagues and disasters that had reshaped the very fabric of galactic civilization, but he had never seen anything like the human woman who stood before him now. Amara-chan waited patiently in the center of the grand chamber. Her posture relaxed, her expression calm, as if appearing through a fold in space in front of thousands of alien dignitaries was the most natural thing in the world. The fold itself had vanished, leaving no trace of its existence, no energy signature, no residual distortion. Nothing that the Senate's instruments could measure or analyze it. Was as if reality had simply opened a door for her and then closed it behind her, leaving no evidence that it had ever been there at all. Cal Morath found his voice at last. "You possess fold technology," he said. And even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow and inadequate. "That is a Class 12 capability. Your species was listed as Class 7. The human woman smiled again, and the expression sent a chill through every being in the chamber who could read human facial patterns. It was not the smile of a primitive creature awed by its first contact with advanced civilization. It was the smile of someone who held all the cards and knew exactly when to play them. "We learned a long time ago that it is unwise to show your hand before you understand the game," she said. Ambassador Varthix rose from his observation pod, his mandibles clicking with a mixture of outrage and fear. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We have monitored your world for 3 centuries. We have cataloged every advancement, every technology, every step you have taken toward the stars. Our instruments would have detected research of this magnitude. Your instruments detected exactly what we wanted them to detect." Amara replied, "Nothing more, nothing less." The silence that followed was absolute. Volthex felt his compound eyes adjusting, trying to focus on this creature that had just overturned everything he believed about the universe. The Sithrani were masters of observation. Their monitoring technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. The idea that a primitive species could have deceived them was impossible, and yet here she stood. Proof that the impossible had happened. Senator Mrixtal slithered forward, his scaled body tense with barely controlled aggression. "You admit to deceiving the Senate," he said, his voice carrying the weight of accusation. "You have hidden your true capabilities while we observed you in good faith." "Good faith," Amara repeated, and there was something cold in her tone now, something hard and sharp beneath the surface calm. "You placed observation posts in our solar system without our consent. You monitored our communications without our knowledge. You cataloged us like specimens in a laboratory and wagered on how long it would take for us to destroy ourselves." She paused, letting the words settle. "Is that what you call good faith?" Mrixtal had no response. The truth was that the senator had participated in exactly those betting pools. He had wagered that humanity would achieve nuclear self-annihilation within a century. A bet he had been looking forward to collecting on High Arbiter Kelmorath raised one massive appendage, calling for order. "Let us set aside questions of fault and focus on the present," he said. "You have requested to address the Senate. You have demonstrated capabilities that far exceed our expectations. The question now is simple. What do you want?" Amara-chan looked around the grand chamber, meeting the eyes of species she had studied for decades. Through intercepted transmissions and stolen data, she saw fear in many of them. The primal terror of predators who had suddenly realized they were not at the top of the food chain. She saw curiosity in others, the scientific wonder of beings who had just witnessed something that defied their understanding of physics, and in a few, she saw something else, respect perhaps, even hope. "We do not want to join your Senate," she said at last. "We are not here to petition for membership or beg for recognition, or ask to be taught like children at the feet of their elders." The chamber stirred, confusion rippling through the assembled delegates. Every new species that achieved interstellar capability sought membership in the Galactic Senate. It was the natural order of things. The alternative was to remain isolated, cut off from the vast networks of trade and knowledge and protection that the Senate provided. No sane civilization would choose isolation over integration. Then why are you here? Kelmorth asked. Amara Chun took a deep breath. This was the moment that 3 centuries of preparation had led to. This was the reason humanity had hidden and waited and built in silence while the galaxy dismissed them as primitive and doomed. We are here to warn you, she said. There is something coming. Something from the void between galaxies. Something that your monitoring systems have been too focused inward to see. She raised her hand, and every display in the Grand Chamber flickered and changed. Screens that had shown the Senate seal and the faces of delegates now displayed astronomical data. Charts and graphs and sensor readings that scrolled past in an endless stream of terrifying information. For the past 200 years, we have been monitoring anomalies at the edge of observable space. Amara continued. Energy signatures that do not match any natural phenomenon. Gravitational distortions that suggest objects of impossible mass moving at impossible speeds. Patterns of destruction across distant galaxies that follow a clear and deliberate path. She pointed to a section of the display that showed a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic group. The path leads here, she said, to this galaxy, to us. Verthex studied the data with growing horror. His scientific training allowed him to understand what he was seeing, even as his mind rebelled against it. The energy readings were off the scale. The gravitational signatures suggested vessels or entities of a size that dwarfed anything in the galaxy, and the pattern of destruction, the systematic annihilation of star systems and civilizations across an arc of space that spanned millions of light years, painted a picture of something vast and terrible and utterly merciless. How long? He heard himself ask. How long until it arrives? Amara Chun met his gaze. 63 years, she said. By our calculations, the first wave will reach the outer arms of the galaxy in 63 years. After that, it will take approximately 2 years to sweep through the entire galactic community. Every world, every species, everything. Grand Chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted and screamed and demanded answers. Some accused the humans of fabricating the threat to manipulate the Senate. Others called for immediate verification of the data. Still, others simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process the idea that everything they had built over millions of years could be destroyed in the span of a single lifetime. Through it all, Amara Chun stood calm and still, waiting for the storm to pass. She had delivered the warning. Now came the hard part, convincing the galaxy to listen. The revelation, the chaos in the Grand Chamber, continued for nearly an hour before High Arbiter Kelmorth managed to restore order. When the last shouts had faded and the last accusations had been hurled, a heavy silence settled over the assembly. Thousands of delegates sat in their observation pods, staring at the human woman who had just announced the end of everything they knew. Senator Mrixtel was the first to speak, his voice dripping with suspicion and barely controlled rage. This is manipulation, he declared. The humans appear from nowhere with impossible technology and convenient warnings of cosmic doom. They expect us to believe that they alone have detected a threat that our own monitoring systems have missed for millennia. He turned to face the assembly, his scales flushing with the colors of righteous anger. I say this is a ploy, a scheme to insert themselves into galactic affairs through fear and deception. Amara Chun listened without expression. She had expected this reaction. She had prepared for it. Senator, your skepticism is understandable, she said when Mrixtal had finished. We anticipated that you would doubt us. That is why we brought the data. She gestured to the displays that still showed the scrolling astronomical information, everything we have collected over the past 2 Centuries is now available to your scientific councils. The raw sensor readings, the analysis protocols, the mathematical models we use to predict the threat's trajectory. All of it is yours to verify independently. Ambassador Vortex studied the data streams with his compound eyes. His scientific training was screaming at him that something was wrong, that the patterns he was seeing could not be natural, but his political instincts were equally loud, warning him that accepting human data at face value could be catastrophic. You claim to have been monitoring these anomalies for 200 years, he said, but your species only discovered radio technology a century and a half ago. How could you possibly have developed the instruments necessary for such observations? Amara smiled. And there was something ancient in that expression, something that spoke of secrets kept for generations. We learned from you, she said simply, from your transmissions, your communications, your scientific discussions that we intercepted and decoded and studied. We took the knowledge you shared among yourselves and we improved upon it. We built better sensors, better computers, better methods of analysis, and we pointed them outward, toward the spaces that you had stopped looking at long ago. The implications hung in the air like smoke. They, Cithrani and the hegemony and the dozens of other advanced civilizations, had been so focused on watching each other, so consumed by their internal politics and rivalries, that they had neglected the universe beyond their borders and humanity. The primitive species they had dismissed as doomed had been watching everything. A delegate from the Vorthi Confederacy raised one of its tentacles, requesting permission to speak. Assuming the data is accurate, it said in a voice like wind through crystalline tubes, "What do you propose we do? The threat you describe is beyond anything we have ever faced. Our combined military forces could not hope to stand against entities of such magnitude." Amara nodded, acknowledging the question. "You are correct," she said. "No single species, no alliance of species as currently configured, could survive what is coming. Not the hegemony with its vast fleets, not the collective with its ancient technologies, not even humanity with everything we have built in secret." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Alone, we all die. That is the simple truth." High Arbiter Kel Morath leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. "And together," he asked, "what happens if we stand together?" Amara met his gaze directly. "Together, we have a chance." She raised her hand again, and the displays shifted. The astronomical data was replaced by schematics and diagrams, technical specifications for technologies that made even the most advanced delegates gasp in astonishment. For 3 centuries, humanity has been developing weapons and defenses against threats that we knew you had never faced. Amara continued, "We assumed that if something dangerous existed in the universe, the great civilizations of the galaxy would have encountered it already. When we realized that you had not, we began preparing for the possibility that we would be the first to face it." She highlighted a series of blueprints that showed vessels of extraordinary design. "Our ships can travel faster than anything in your fleets. Our weapons can target and destroy objects at distances you consider impossible. Our shields can withstand forces that would vaporize your strongest battle stations. We developed all of this while you watched us build chemical rockets and celebrate landing our own moon." The chamber was utterly silent. Even Senator Mixtel had no accusations to offer in the face of what he was seeing. The technical specifications scrolling past represented advances that would take his own species thousands of years to achieve, if they could achieve them at all, and the humans claimed to have developed all of it in 3 centuries, while hiding it from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. "Why?" Ambassador Vortex asked at last, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why hide all of this? Why not reveal yourself sooner? Why not join the galactic community and share your knowledge. Amara-chan was quiet for a moment when she spoke. Her voice was softer, more personal than it had been, because we were afraid. She admitted, "We had watched your civilizations through your own communications. We had seen how you treated species you considered inferior. We had witnessed the wars, and the exploitation and the casual cruelty that the powerful inflicted upon the weak." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who suddenly found themselves unable to hold her gaze. "We were not certain that you would accept us as equals. We were not certain that you would not try to take what we had built for yourselves. So we hid. And we watched, and we prepared. We prepared for the possibility that we would have to fight you, and we prepared for the possibility that we would have to fight alongside you. We hoped for the latter. We planned for both." High Arbiter Kelmorth was silent for a long time. He had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had made decisions that affected trillions of lives across thousands of worlds, but he had never faced a moment like this, a moment when everything he believed about the universe was proven wrong, a moment when a species he had dismissed as proven wrong, as missed as primitive, revealed itself to be perhaps the most remarkable civilization the galaxy had ever produced. "You said you are here to warn us," he said. "Finally, but warning is not enough. What else do you offer?" Amara-chan straightened, and in that moment she seemed to represent not just herself, but all of humanity. 3 centuries of preparation, generations of sacrifice, the collected hopes and dreams and fears of an entire species standing on the threshold of a new era. "We offer alliance," she said, "true alliance, with full sharing of technology and knowledge, not as supplicants begging for protection, not as subordinates serving greater powers, but as equals, standing together against a threat that none of us can face alone." She let the offer hang in the air. "You have 63 years to verify our data and make your decision. We hope you will choose to stand with us, but we will survive either way. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy will survive with us." The silence breaks forever. The Grand Chamber erupted into chaos once more as Amara-chan finished speaking. Delegates shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Accusations flew across the vast space, mixing with demands and threats and desperate pleas for clarification. Senator Mrixtel pushed himself forward, his massive scaled body blocking the path between Amara and the exit. "You dare to stand before the assembled might of the galaxy and issue ultimatums," he hissed. "Your species is barely out of the mud of your homeworld. You have no right to dictate terms to civilizations that were building starships when your ancestors were discovering fire." Amara regarded him calmly. "We are not dictating terms, Senator. We are offering partnership. The difference is significant. You are also welcome to refuse. We simply wanted you to understand the consequences of that choice." Several delegates from the hegemony had gathered behind Mrixtel, their scales flushing with colors of aggression and territorial display. For a moment, it seemed as though violence might erupt in the heart of the Grand Chamber, something that had not happened in over 1,000 years. High Arbiter Kelmorth's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Enough," he commanded. "We are not savages brawling in the dust. We are the Galactic Senate, and we will conduct ourselves accordingly." The hegemony delegates fell back. Though their aggressive colors did not fade entirely, Mrixtel remained where he was, his eyes fixed on Amara with undisguised hostility. "The human has made extraordinary claims," Kelmorth continued, "claims that require verification. Our scientific councils will analyze the data she has provided until they have reached a conclusion. All discussion of alliance is premature." He turned his attention to Amara. "In the meantime, I would ask that you answer one more question. You have shown us what you can do. You have demonstrated technologies that exceed anything we believe possible from a species at your level of development. But technology alone does not win wars. What forces can you bring to bear if this threat is real? Amara was quiet for a moment. This was the final card, the one she had been holding back for exactly this moment. Perhaps it would be easier to show you, she said. She touched a small device on her wrist, and the displays throughout the grand chamber shifted once more. The images of scientific data and technical schematics were replaced by a view of space, specifically the space around Earth. At first, the delegates saw only what they expected: the small blue world with its single moon, the familiar configuration of planets orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. But then the view changed. Sections of apparently empty space began to shimmer, and where there had been nothing, something appeared. Ships, thousands of them, vessels of every size, from small fighters to massive carriers that dwarfed anything in the fleets of the hegemony or the collective. They had been hidden, cloaked by technology that made them completely invisible to even the most advanced sensors. And they had been there all along. Ambassador Vertex felt his compound eyes widening as he tried to count the vessels filling the display. It was impossible. There were too many, and even as he watched, more continued to appear, decloaking in waves that seemed to have no end. 37,000 combat-ready vessels, Amara said quietly, crewed by humans who have trained for this moment their entire lives, equipped with weapons and defenses that your own ships cannot match. She gestured, and the view pulled back further, showing the entire solar system. More ships appeared, stationed around every planet and moon, filling the spaces between worlds with a fleet that rivaled the combined navies of the three greatest galactic powers. This is what we built while you watched us struggle with chemical rockets, she continued. This is what we prepared while you wagered on our extinction. This is humanity's answer to a universe that dismissed us as primitive and irrelevant. The grand chamber was absolutely silent. Even Senator Mrixdale had no words. The scale of what the humans had accomplished was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. A species that had been catalogued as Class 7, as primitive and doomed, had somehow constructed the largest military force in known space without anyone noticing. They had hidden it in plain sight, right under the noses of observers who thought they were watching a civilization in its death throes. And now they stood revealed, not as primitives begging for acceptance, but as a power that could reshape the balance of the entire galaxy. High Arbiter Kelmorath rose to his full height, an action that signified the most profound respect in his species. The Senate will convene an emergency session to review the data you have provided, he said. Our scientific councils will work without rest until we have verified your claims. And if they are verified, he paused, choosing his next words carefully. If they are verified, the Senate will consider your offer of alliance with all the gravity it deserves. Amara nodded. That is all we ask. She turned to face the assembly one final time. 63 years, she repeated. That is how long we have to prepare. How long you have to verify our data, to make your decisions, to choose whether you will stand with us or stand apart. We hope you will choose wisely. She touched the device on her wrist again, and behind her, the air began to shimmer. A fold in space opened, a doorway to somewhere impossibly far away. We will be watching, she said. We will be ready. And when the time comes, we hope we will not be standing alone. She stepped through the fold and vanished, leaving the grand chamber in stunned silence. For several minutes, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the delegates began to talk among themselves. Quiet conversations at first, growing louder as the shock faded and the reality of what had happened began to sink in the monitoring stations around Earth. Human operators watched the chaos unfold with satisfaction. Centuries of preparation had led to this moment. Generations of sacrifice had made it possible, and now the galaxy knew that truth. Humanity was not a primitive species struggling toward an inevitable extinction. Humanity was a power unlike anything the universe had seen, a civilization that had hidden its true strength while preparing for challenges that others could not even imagine. The quiet species had spoken, and the stars would never be the same. Ambassador Vivek sat in his observation pod long after most of the other delegates had departed. He stared at the empty space where the human woman had stood, his mind racing through the implications of everything he had witnessed. For 300 years, his people had watched humanity with contempt and pity. For 300 years, they had assumed they understood what the humans were and what they would become. They had been wrong completely, utterly, catastrophically wrong, and now, for the first time in his 900 years of life, Verzex felt something he had never felt before. Not fear, though fear was certainly part of it, not respect. Though respect had certainly been earned, what he felt was hope. Hope that perhaps, in the face of the coming darkness, the galaxy had found exactly what it needed: a species that had been underestimated, a species that had learned to survive by preparing for the worst, a species that had just offered to share everything it had, built with those who had dismissed it as worthless. Humanity had broken its silence, and in doing so, they might have saved them all.